Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, I sure appreciate you stopping in. Guys, this morning we are going to dive right into this one. Top 5 habitat season, right, fails. These 5, guys, the list is long. So I've done some other videos, maybe I put some others at the top 5. These are the top 5 this morning, thinking that jump right out to me, that are a common mistake each and every year that sadly can lead to other fails. So let's talk about this one, guys. Number 1, just that, the habitat season, right? There's this myth out there in the industry, especially in the north, and for whatever reason, right, you would think that it would just be the opposite because the weather conditions are better as the season goes on. You would think that the north would believe that they could extend their habitat season, and the south is the ones that would have to get it done sooner before the growing season kicks in, but it's not. The habitat season is just deemed January to March. For some reason, folks think that they got to dive right in the day after season, get in there and start the chainsaws. And like we said, the problem with it is they've been coached or learning from a popular YouTube channel, whatever that case is, and they get out there, just grab the chainsaw and go to work. Well, there's multiple things. Like I said, the Midwest and the North. If your trees are so cold, you're not going to be able to hinge them very well unless it just happens to be a white oak and you catch it just on the right day. You shouldn't be hinge cutting in December and January anyway, unless you can get the perfect weather conditions. I did a little bit here a couple of weeks ago here in Kentucky because it was 65 degrees and has been, and it's going to be 60 again today, right? So just really gauge that, guys. Just understand that there are so many things on the habitat chore list, if you will, right? And that stretches out, and there is a pecking order, right? Removing the canopy, looking at, so that could be a logging, right? If you have logging, let the logger do a lot of your work, right? Get in there, get that value, get that return on investment, put it back in your pocket. The next step of that is possibly going in and removing invasives. Maybe you have a bunch of cedar, right? Maybe, yes, cedar isn't an invasive, everything in moderation. I love red cedar in bedding areas. I wouldn't, if I had them, I do have them, right? I don't take them all out because then you just got to plant them back in. So I'm taking the bigger ones out, leaving the smaller ones so we get the lifespan of that cedar. The other side of invasives is, bush honeysuckle, autumn olive, Osage orange, all of this garbage, if you will, right? So then you tackle that. Then maybe hinge cutting. Then maybe putting, native grasses or miscanthus clumps and all this cool stuff that we do in bedding areas and habitat, right? Building better habitat. But before any of that is done, remember, take the time to research and design, whether it's your design or someone else's or mine, whatever that is. Understand where you're putting that stuff before you just build better habitat, right? Number 2, prevailing winds, guys. I've talked to many people about this. I just actually had this conversation on the phone the other night. Talked to both of my clients this past week that I was with. This here, guys, I believe is probably the top 2 of what handcuffs or what gets folks in trouble trying to only set stands up or only pay attention to the prevailing wind. And the reason for that is, guys, is if you go into that mindset, that tells me right off the bat that folks will say, I don't need any east wind stands because I just get a lot of west winds. Well, what that tells me, guys, is your farm will never circulate completely. There might be 2 good stands that are set up for west winds. A lot of times they're not even connected, but what happens is, right, when that isn't east wind, one, you don't have a place to hunt. The other side of that is, guys, is remember, I just talked about this on the Whitetail Driven Tech through our school app. I just talked to the members there, the community, about, remember, if you never hunt the other side of the farm, that's not a prevailing wind, right? That side of the farm is working for you, setting the side up that you can. But if it's not there, they don't have anything to dissect on the opposite wind, that you could be hunting them on the other side of the farm, and you're not allowing the other side of the farm to be connected. So you have a very fragmented farm. So while we're on that, guys, and we touched on that, let's break to this real quick. if you are interested, we would love to have you join the community. There's a lot of stuff that we're doing through the school app, SKOOL. I'll put a link in the description here, guys, or the comments. Would love to have you there. It's not for everyone. It is a subscription. It is a paid deal. We're putting like the logging for whitetails videos on there right now. That's an extra purchase. But it's for the folks that just, these videos here, we try to keep them as short and to the point as we possibly can. But there's a lot of stuff that we dive into in that community that's a lot more in-depth whiteboard drawings. That's where we do our giveaways and stuff like that, guys, and it's going great. I think we're 38 members strong or whatever it is right now and growing every day. And it's been a blessing. You can communicate amongst each other. I'm able to answer questions, really dive deep into, I guess, the next step, if you will. So just wanted to, invite you to that if that's something that you're interested in. Number 3, hinge cut only mindset. That kind of ties into, like we talked before, right? The habitat season side of it. Guys, hinge cutting is a great tool, right? The word hinge cut makes some people nauseous, right? It's not pretty. I had a comment I think it was this morning or last night on my TikTok channel. Well, I would never do that to my property because it's ugly. Well, the best deer farms that I've ever been on, the deer properties that I've ever been on, are not pretty, right? They're not pretty. The're not manicured. It's not a landscape effect. It's dirty in bedding areas. Now, to me, I think it looks great, right? There's no better bedding area that I've ever found, guys, that's not just solid hinge cut. It's a little bit of canopy release. It's a little bit of hack and squirt. It's a little bit of hinging done right. It's a little bit of native grasses. It's all of that. Conifers, thermal cover. It's all of that together, not just a hinge cut only. I refer to this a lot. You probably heard me talk about this in the past, guys, but I went to many properties, was on multiple last year, but one that always stands out. I think it was like $4,000 that this gentleman paid on an 80 to have somebody come in and hinge cut, and they hinge cut everything in the core. I mean, like 20 acres. It was random, scattered. Guys, I walked the entire property with that gentleman and not one hinge cut. This was 2 years later. Not one hinge cut was alive. Not any of it. There was no deer sign in it because there were areas that they did. It was too thick, too nasty, and the canopy wasn't released before they did it, and they all died. So at that point, it's just structure. Well, too much structure is worse than no structure at all, right? So just remember, there's a reason for the tool, but it's not a fix-all. Planning food plots, number 4. Planning food plots and focusing on the architecture. Guys, this piece of the puzzle, would I ever own a property that I couldn't plan a food plot on? Probably not, right? Because it is a big piece of the puzzle. It's a big piece of our management plan. But, guys, the food plotting is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of what actually keeps that deer there. Now, a well-placed food plot, where your food plots are, the shape of the food plot itself is huge, right? The area. But before you go in and start figuring out what you're going to be planning, and you're focused on that food plot, and it's food plot, like I say, right, only mentality. And then what I find is folks are hunting on it. The first thing that my mind goes to when I hear food plot architecture is you're sitting on your food plot. No, you should not take an acre or 2 acre food plot and break it up into 20 different compartments, because most of them don't lead to the point of impact. If you are going to divide it, make sure that all leads back to the point of impact, which 95%, like I said, don't. They're just a checkerboard out there. The theory is the more that buck is out there, has to dissect all those areas, the longer he's going to be there. Huge issue. It doesn't happen that way. The more you break up an acre, now we're talking about a food plot, right? There's a shot plot, a food plot, and a destination. And when you break these food plots up into 20 compartments and they're an acre or 2, they actually use it less than they do. Than they do in daylight, and it just doesn't compute, guys. I've been on hundreds of them that they tried that and it doesn't work. So before you focus put all your efforts into food plot only, yes. I'm always thinking about, the food plot way of building soil and what I'm going to be doing. But that happens. That's the reason I do these, try to do these videos in order for you, right? Is because I don't want people thinking in January right now, unless it's 60 degrees in Kentucky and we're talking about a frost seeding or an interseeding your clover. But other than that, we're not talking about food plots, and we're not just spending hours and hours and hours and hours studying what I'm going to plant. We should be looking at your doe bedding areas, placement, the design, the flow, your FSI versus your TSI. All of this needs to be put way more focus on that than the food plot itself. So the number 5 here, Buck's interior first approach. Sadly, guys, I see time and time again, a lot of folks just resort to, like I said, right, grabbing the chainsaw, running out in the woods, and our minds as hunters, as humans, right, as bucks and bucks only, bucks first. Guys, that approach can totally destroy the flow and the holding power and affect your carrying capacity on your farms. It's the God's honest truth, right? And the reason for that is if your does, I'm asked this all the time, well, what is a doe bedding and a buck bedding? Yes, we refer to them as, doe bedding and buck bedding and habitat pockets that we build. And the reason I label them that way, one, is so when I'm talking to my clients, I know which bedding area I'm talking about. Two, you have to be able to place, these does want to be able, they're very social. They want to be able to bed within the first 100-yard rim of them food sources. And if they don't have that availability, guys, they will search until they find that first available correct habitat area. And if that is down the chain and you just go in, or in the core, worst case scenario, right, in the core, and you build a, maybe your food plot's an acre and you go in there and build a half acre or a quarter acre that I see a lot, right, interior bedding, and think it's going to be buck bedding, your does are going to take it over because it's the first, if it's done correctly, it's the first correct habitat area, right? It's got the most browse, most sunlight to it. Then your bucks aren't there. So you want to, within the first 100-yard rim, usually starting about 20 feet off from the food plot, not unless it's a shot plot. It's not right on the food plot because you got to be able to slide movement past it, something we teach and talk about all the time. But it's right there, right? It's available. Those does are very linear, right? They come out and they go right directional, I guess, right? They go out and go right to the food source. Our bucks are what we want to drag linear past those areas, right? So that means bedding back in, habitat pockets down the chain, not going in and just making these what I call a satellite bedding area, one that has nothing to do with flow, one that you can't get on the downwind side of to hunt it even if you wanted to unless you were in the core of the property. All these things pile up before you know it. Season comes around, you didn't focus on your doe bedding out by your food sources, and your bucks don't have a place to live. They're on the neighbors, and they get caught coming back from your place back to their bed. Your neighbor gets lucky. You're doing nothing but driving deer off your farm at that point. So you have to start with does first. Number 6, guys, is a bonus, right? What I see this time of the year is probably the most overlooked feature and strategy and huntability attraction, I guess you could call it, right? That's overlooked. Overlooking the power of water. Guys, I just encourage you not to grab a mini excavator and go in and dig deer ponds. It's a huge devastation in the whitetail world right now. CWD is the least of our worries. EHD, that's directly tied to these water sources, is a huge, huge problem. And guys, a deer, I can put a 300-gallon water tank directly next to a creek, let's say. Deer want stagnant water, hence the reason they get themselves in trouble with EHD, right? But you could have a nice flowing creek and people say, oh, I'm not going to put a water hole there. That's crazy. And it's just like, that water hole, those deer will water out of that water tank or that water hole 10 to 1 from that creek. And the reason is, one, it's flowing and it's cold water. Usually they don't want cold water and making noise. And guys, creek shelves are usually, in cavities, right? And they have to go down in there. When they're down in there, they can't see out of it. They don't like it, right? Big ponds are the same thing. Will they use a big pond? Maybe, if there's no brush around the end and they can actually see out of that, right? But a tank in line of their movement, not only the huntability, but that you can get them to use it more. And I'm convinced, guys, that I had a buck a couple years ago here on the farm, and I'm 100% sure that he had EHD. Neck was all swollen up in September, acting very, very dopey. And he was here, he was on my water holes like religiously, a 4.5-year-old deer, and he was on there all the time, 2-3 times a day, right? He was bedded right close to it. And I'd go in and fill it, and he'd be there 10 minutes later to getting a drink of water, right? So what happened is come the rut, that was September, come the rut, this deer's chasing does all over, and he made it through. So I don't feel that deer would have made that through. That water hole didn't cure him, right? But it kept him away from the midge long enough that he was maybe able to beat the first dose that he got. A volume of water, folks just think that they're going to put a liner in and it's 20,000 gallons. It's way better than 300 or 500 gallons, and it's not, guys. They don't use them near as much. The liners will eventually crack. They put a hoof through it. You have to, and they're concave in there. It just doesn't work, right? I've seen it time and time and time again. Folks that do that, my clients, without even my input, guys, I'll get to farms and there'll be just huge crevice, and it was like, oh, there was no pond there. Yeah, I dug a deer pond, they wouldn't use it, and it was really muddy around it. And I had somebody else say that it was an EHD threat, and they got rid of it. Now they've got tanks, and the deer use them. So it's my personal opinion, but it's also something that I see time and time again from clients all over the country. So these guys are the top 5 with a bonus 6 that I just see religiously that folks fail when it comes to the habitat season, right? And a parting note, guys, I'll share something with you. I designed properties all the way up until September, and over the years I've caught a lot of slack for that. And I'm here to tell you guys, if I had the time and I could do everybody early, I would do everybody early, and everybody would have time to take the design. But I can't get to everybody, right? I do 6, 8 a month, whatever it is when I'm traveling. I've done 10 and 12, and I can't get to everybody. But the problem with that, or the good thing of that is, right, knowing that you can do these creations longer, just remember, guys, 80% of the properties that I get to, right, don't have correct habitat. In other words, you can see through the timber 200 yards, but probably 90% of the properties I get to have available habitat and available food. So hear me out. But usually that food is 60 to 80 feet in the air, right? In trees, or the canopy's blocking it or something, right? So if we get to a spot and there's no logging and you're 10 years from logging, or logging was done years ago, and now you've got all this 6, 8, 10-inch trees, no logger's going to come in to take care of that. Maybe it's popple, maybe it's maple, right? The list goes on and on of the could-be's. You get there, those are the properties that you want to understand that if you go in and do a little FSI work in your bedding areas, not TSI, FSI, right? In your bedding areas, and you bring that leaf stock later in the year, May, June, right? You go in there and you bring that leaf stock down. Guys, those are the properties that I see every year that do great right off the bat, right? And the reason for that is they won't be able to eat just the leaf stock that you're bringing down to their head level, right? It's no different than feeding them in the winter, right? You're bringing, woody shrub tips down to them. Now you've got woody shrub tips and the volume of leaves. You get that down to the forest floor, guys, and they can't possibly eat, depending on how much you put down, but and your deer counts, right? But they can't possibly eat all the leaf stock. And all of a sudden you have this explosion of deer on the property, and then they settle in as, you know, the rest of the years come. But don't think for a minute that you don't have the available time and, you know, availability to do that.